Thanks for downloading this edition of Forethought. I'm the producer, Giles Edwards, and I think this is a delightful talk. John Osborne tells a story which will be familiar to almost everyone, and he uses it to explore an experience which is also familiar to almost all of us. He's introduced by Carmen Mohammadi.
Welcome to Somerset House in London and to Forethought. Now, how many emails have you got flagged in your inbox right now? How long have some of those messages been sitting there? How many people are waiting on a reply? It's okay, of course. You've just been busy. It's just been one of those weeks, months, years. It happens. Well, tonight's speaker, John Osborne, wears the shoe on the other foot. What's it like being the one waiting for that reply? Ladies and gentlemen, John Osborne.
On Monday morning last week, I went into a cafe to have some breakfast. It's nice to have eggs and coffee sometimes. I thought, this is what I should do every Monday morning. What better way to start the week than with a newspaper and good food in a cafe that's just opened up down the road from my house. But as soon as I was ready to leave, I had to deal with asking for the bill. I don't like asking for the bill. I'm not very good at it. Even if I'm in a hurry, I just sit there patiently as members of staff walk past me. And I don't have what it takes to look up and say, "Excuse me." This is how I deal with lots of things I want in life. I sit there in hope, waiting until I can make eye contact and ask for the bill. But this waitress was an unreturned text message. She was an email that hasn't been replied to. And I was looking up in her direction like I was refreshing my inbox. But still she didn't look over. It felt like it went on all morning. I sat there cursing my inability to just ask for the bill. I find these situations so unnecessarily stressful. All I wanted to do was pay and leave, but I couldn't. I had to sit there and wait. It would have been fine if the cafe had been busy. I'd have understood. I'd look at the staff bustling around with trays of cappuccinos and dirty knives and forks, picking up napkins from the floor. But the waitress was just standing there, talking to the chef in his black and white check trousers, as he updated her on what had happened after she'd left the club last night. I hadn't seen the waiter since he'd brought over my second cup of coffee nearly an hour earlier, and even though I still had plenty of time until I had to leave the cafe and head to the train station, I was starting to worry. I've never worked out how to get someone's attention and say, "Excuse me," in a confident voice. It's not my style. I wish it was. But after a while of sitting there, I realised that actually the problem was nothing to do with asking for the bill. That isn't what was stressing me out and making me feel uneasy. In this hectic, breathless world, all of us are being ignored all the time. I am aware I am far too sensitive. I know we have to deal with much bigger things than someone not replying to a text message. But being ignored gives me such a horrible feeling. Yet another thing for my stomach to have to deal with. All of us are being ignored constantly. More and more ways of communicating means there are more and more ways of being ignored. We allow people to disappear from our lives far too easily. Sometimes ignoring someone is just easier than replying. "I'll deal with this later," you think. And it's yet another thing you never get round to doing. Some people are terrible at replying to things, and they don't realise there are consequences for the people waiting for their phone calls to be returned. We are all walking round with each other's unanswered texts and emails in our pockets. Maybe we all need to get better at this. Maybe we need to find ways to cope with all the things beeping in our faces. Maybe we should all delete our Facebook accounts. Maybe we should throw our mobile phones into the sea and say, well, that was all fun while it lasted. I'm sure none of us would miss it. We'd definitely be better off without them. It would be like when you've been in a traffic jam for so long, you switch off the engine. And it feels so refreshing to sit in that silence. After a while, the waiter resurfaced, and I hoped maybe he'd realised how long it had been since he last served me a drink, and maybe this was my chance to get the bill and leave, but he walked straight past me and positioned himself behind the counter with his back to me. I think he had memorised pi and was tapping it into the till. Both him and the waitress were a non-wave from a car you let out at a busy junction. You'd flashed your lights and made an off-you-go mate gesture, but you get nothing in return. No nod of the head in gratitude or a thumbs up from the steering wheel. And you were so clear when leaving that voicemail. I need to talk to you as soon as you get this. And for the rest of the night, you kept looking at your phone, but they never called back. And you think, why do some people make life so complicated? Why is it so hard for some people to return an email or to answer a simple question or to say, thanks for the invitation, I had a really nice time. Let's do it again sometime. It can feel so cruel. People don't mean to hurt other people's feelings, but they do. I exchanged a look with the couple on the next table because I had noticed they were trying to get the bill too. I think they felt sorry for me and my pathetic attempts to get noticed. We were like strangers caught in a hailstorm who just shrug at each other as if to say, well, they didn't mention anything about this on the forecast. They were my kind of people. People who don't quite have what it takes to raise your voice to try and get someone's attention. Too many people shout oi. They click their fingers and say garçon, miss. They shout and yell and wave their arms. I don't like being around those people. I'm embarrassed when I'm in a cafe or restaurant and they're at the table next to me. Or even worse, if I'm eating with them. You can tell a lot about a person by how they deal with waiting staff. You can tell a lot about someone by how quickly they reply to their emails. But there's a bit of me that is so jealous of the oi people. They're generally the ones who achieve things. They are never late for work or meetings because they've been patiently sitting at a table somewhere thinking, well, I'll just give them one more minute. It's not like this is what happens every time I go to a cafe. Sometimes it's not a problem at all. I am capable of asking for the bill. I'm not an introvert who stares at the floor and is incapable of the simplest of conversations. Sometimes I look up and the waiter or waitress catches my eye and I say, can I have the bill, please? In a nice, polite, nonchalant way. And they say, yeah, of course. And wander off to get it for me. And nothing could be easier. Sometimes you don't need words. They can tell by your eyes or the way you're sitting, like a solid relationship where words are secondary. Life works well when you don't need to ask. It is implicit. An unobtrusive, unsolicited bill on a saucer, weighted down by a mint imperial. Brought out a split second before your brain had even registered that maybe you were ready for the bill. It's a beautiful moment. Eyes meeting across a crowded room. Someone who can read your thoughts. A text message from someone saying, hey, we haven't hung out for a while. Let's go to the park. I'll bring the beer, you bring the pickled onions. a postcard from a friend on holiday. You didn't know people still wrote postcards. You didn't know they knew your address. You had no idea they had such neat handwriting. The joy of hearing from someone out of the blue. The luxury of getting the bill without having to ask for it. Sometimes when I haven't seen the waiter or waitress for a long time, I start to worry. Maybe they've tripped over. I hope they're okay. I'd just like to see their face again. I'd just like to hear from them. Because often there is a good reason for people being quiet or making themselves go invisible. They want to be left alone. They need to be left alone. They're going through a tough time. Their brother is ill. They have personal, private things to deal with. And nothing could be further from their minds than what's arriving in their inbox. It's important that we're able to make a distinction between someone not replying to us because they're unable to and because they can't be bothered. It's so hard to tell, though. If you never reply to people, you will never have the benefit of the doubt when you need it. And inevitably, sometimes in life, you do need to go invisible for people to leave you alone until you feel content to resurface again. It's important not to get too affected by this behaviour because it happens all the time. And it's only because people are busy and they don't mean to cause offence, but it's hard. I try to tell myself I shouldn't take a non-reply personally, but it's yet another thing to cope with in this terrifying modern way of life. I don't think it's just me that feels like this. I've been in a cafe when every single customer is trying to get the attention of someone with an apron on. But we are all too polite to make a fuss. Instead, we are mouthing, "Can we have the bill, please? Can we have the bill, please? Can we have the bill, please?" But all the staff have disappeared. And you think, I hope they have gone into a room full of hedgehogs in incubators. And they are adjusting their tiny blankets and pillows, checking their little thermometers in their little mouths, because otherwise there is no excuse for them not to be out here looking after us. Too often we feel like another unopened council tax bill, stuffed inside the probably deal with this later drawer. And it's hard not to feel down on ourselves when we are made to feel so anonymous. And I know some people don't have this problem. To some people, the thought of someone unable to ask for the bill must seem preposterous. My friend Lisa once touched a waitress's arm with such tenderness and said, "Excuse me, you couldn't fetch us the bill when you've got a spare second, could you?" And it was as affectionate as a new pair of pyjamas wrapped up under a Christmas tree. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. It seems so straightforward. Maybe even I'd be able to give it a go. But it's hard to perfect these things. One person's affectionate pat on the arm is another's accusation of assault. And you have to wait there until a police officer arrives at the cafe, and as they take your statement, you think, all I wanted was to ask for the bill.
Thank you very much, John. I don't know what to say.